requests from viewers to do a video about like how I got into teaching, how I got through the teacher credential program and things like that, which is actually really impressive to me because there are all these new teachers or aspiring teachers that are on YouTube watching videos like mine, I guess, and other people who make teacher videos and kind of watching to see what people do. And I just think that's actually very impressive that you are passionate enough about teaching that you would go out in your spare time, obviously, and watch YouTube videos and try and learn more and more about how people get started in teaching. So I definitely wanted to honor those questions and make a video about how I got started teaching. Now keep in mind that this is specific to California teachers. I know our process is a little bit different, and I have a single subject credential. So I am not credentialed to teach like kindergarten through 5th grade. That would be a multiple subject credential, but I'm sure there's another video out there somewhere about how to do the multiple subject credential program. So I figured the most helpful thing would be to just tell you my experience. You can go on a website and just look up the list of requirements that it takes to become a teacher, but sometimes you just want to hear, okay, what was your experience? How did you do it? I remember wondering how people got through the credential, like how did you work? How did you pay for it? What did you do? And there weren't a lot of people that I could talk to at that time, so hopefully my experience can help you out a little bit if you're in that same situation. So the first thing you need is a degree, and my college experience is a little bit confusing. I went to 5 different colleges, but I finally graduated from Cal State Fullerton. And when I transferred to Fullerton, my major was European Studies. I had this grand plan of going to UNR and getting my PhD in Basque Studies. And actually, I had always said that I wouldn't be a teacher, but everyone could see it in me from when I was little. I was super bossy, super organized. I loved teaching people about things too. I was always like the captain of everything. And one of my friends in high school bet me $10. He said, when we go back to our 10-year reunion, I promise you're gonna be a teacher and you're gonna owe me $10. And I was like, no, I'm not gonna be a teacher. Both my parents were teachers. My dad was my 7th grade science teacher, and I tried to avoid it, but I was a music major actually at first, and then I got into like the European studies stuff. But as I took every single class, I just wanted to teach other people about it. After taking all my music classes, I became a piano teacher. And even as I was taking all my European studies classes, I just wanted to teach other people what I was learning. So I finally had the realization that, you know, this is what I'm good at, this is what I do, I really can't avoid this, it must be like in my blood. And my Spanish was not where it needed to be to finish out my European Studies degree, so I figured I could just put those classes into liberal studies and then pursue my teaching credential and just be the best history teacher that I could be. Anyway, long story short, the easiest way for me to graduate was to switch over to a liberal studies degree and just kind of put all of my European history units towards a liberal studies degree. And in my case, a liberal studies degree was just like any classes you want, plus a couple of liberal studies requirements, and you get to graduate. So it was kind of weird. I mean, I kind of have like a European history degree, but technically it's just liberal studies, but I don't have the typical like teacher liberal studies degree that a lot of people who are going into the multiple subject credential program get. So mine is a little bit weird. And then I also had a minor in kinesiology, so that will play into my credential a little bit later too. So since I was doing liberal studies, I could kind of just pick whatever classes I wanted to count towards graduation. So I chose to do some of the credential prerequisite requirements within my degree. So you have to take like adolescent psychology and like multicultural education and reading strategies, like literacy strategies or something like that. So I took some of those prerequisite classes before I actually graduated with my degree. And you can do it either way, it doesn't really matter. The only advantage to taking them after you already get your degree is that they will count as units after your bachelor's on the pay scale later when you start teaching. So you could potentially get paid more when you get hired. I have like units coming out of my ears, so for me it really didn't matter, but that's something to consider when you're kind of finishing up your degree and trying to decide where you want to put those units. Now, after I graduated, I had to reapply to Cal State Fullerton to their teacher credential program. So one of the requirements was a degree, obviously, and then you have to pass the CBEST, which is just a basic skills test. It's really easy. I mean, I don't want to say that it's easy in case anybody out there didn't pass, but it's just It's pretty basic. I mean, just don't be intimidated by it. You might have to like brush up on your like middle school math strategies and stuff like that if it's been a while. The only reason it's hard is just because some of those things you haven't done in a while, but you just write like a really simple essay and do some math problems. It's not that difficult. Then you also have to meet subject matter competency in some way. So a lot of people who are history majors, they will take specific classes that will line up with the credential program. But I didn't do that. I just had like kind of random classes. So I had to take a Cset in social studies. Since so many of my classes were in history and that's what I wanted to teach, that's what I chose, was social studies. So any Cset is going to be pretty difficult. This is where you prove that you know enough about the content to teach it all the way up to 12th grade level. So for the social studies test, there's 6 parts. I think it's like US history, California history, world history, econ, government, and something else. I don't know, I can't remember. But there are 6 parts. And so the good thing about that is that since it's so broad, they can't go very deep. And so the questions are fairly straightforward and simple, but it is very, very broad. You really have to know a lot about everything because you could end up teaching ancient history, US history, world history, whatever. So they want to know that you've got the basics down for all of that. These tests do cost about $75 per test. And so that one, even though there's 6 parts, it's broken down into 3 parts. And I think each part was like $75. You can take them all at once or you can go on different days, but they only offer these like every couple of months, and you usually have to submit your scores with your credential program application. So you really have to start looking into this like well before you go into the credential program. They also want you to have experience working with kids because you don't want to just jump into teaching and think that it's something that you want to do if you've never really worked with kids before. I had been teaching piano lessons forever, working at like summer camps with kids, youth group leader, so I had lots and lots of experience working with kids, so I'm sure that worked in my favor when I applied for the credential program. I also had to go through an interview process where they just kind of asked like situational questions, like you have a kid that won't do their work, what do you do, or whatever. And they're sort of unfair questions because you haven't ever taught in a classroom setting yet, so I don't know. I think they just want to just kind of get a feel for how you would handle things. And so I was kind of taking care of all of these things as I was graduating with my bachelor's degree. So I graduated in the spring, and then in the fall, I started back at Cal State Fullerton in the credential program. And every program does student teaching a little bit differently, but that is always a requirement for any credential program. You will go into an actual classroom and you have to teach. You just have to practice, and you'll have a master teacher that kind of helps you along the way. My program I think was a little bit unique because I haven't heard of too many schools that do it this way, but I had to teach every day from the first day of school to the last day of school. So I had a really, really long student teaching assignment. Some people just do a couple of weeks, but they do like the full day. So I did an entire school year, but it was just in the morning. So I got to teach at a high school, and I taught 10th grade world history and 11th grade US history. I had amazing, amazing master teachers. That's something that makes a pretty big difference. I mean, sometimes you just won't get as lucky as I was, and your master teacher won't really like click with you, or they just may not be the best teacher ever, but I had really, really good examples. It was nice that I taught in 2 different classrooms. They were actually right next to each other, so that was really easy. And actually one of my master teachers had done her student teaching with the other master teacher, so it was like a little circle of life thing. And they were both fantastic. So for the first couple weeks of school, I just kind of observed them and just kind of made notes and kind of tried to get used to their teaching style so that I wouldn't throw off the kids too much when I started teaching. So personally, I loved my student teaching experience. I loved teaching high school. I was only I guess I was like 23 at the time, and a lot of the kids were like 18, so I really wasn't that much older than them. So I think they kind of felt bad for me, and they were really, really good for me. I had very few behavior issues. I mean, they were pretty mature. They were good. I don't think that was everyone's experience in their student teaching assignment, but mine was really awesome. I love the content of especially 10th grade world history, and I really loved teaching 11th grade US history. So I had a lot of fun planning my lessons, so much fun teaching. I got to try out a lot of different things. When I look back at it and I think about it, I mean, I was not the best teacher ever. I did a lot of things that I probably wouldn't do today, but you know, it was good. You have to go through those first couple years of teaching and just kind of work out your style and how you get things done. Oh, and another thing that you should do while you're student teaching is make sure that you get in the district as a sub, because if your master teacher is ever gone, you have to be there anyway, so you might as well be the substitute, and then you get paid for that day. Because you are not getting paid to student teach. In fact, you are paying to student teach. And I just took out student loans. My husband and I had just gotten married. We didn't have enough to cover the cost of my tuition, so I just took out student loans for my credential program. If you are really, really lucky and you live in a place where for some weird reason there are like no teachers, then you might be able to get an internship where you do your student teaching without a master teacher and you get paid to do it. That was common like 15 or 20 years ago. Right now, that hardly ever happens. I wouldn't count on that, but there is like a small chance that if you go out and find a position where you could do that, then your credential program will let you. They're not gonna go out and like look for that for you. That would just be a special circumstance where you happen to know of a position where you could do that. So schedule-wise, I taught from first period until fourth period. I think I taught 2 sections of one class and then 2 sections of the other. And then most days I would run home and grab some lunch, and then I was teaching piano lessons about an hour away actually from where I lived. And I would teach piano from like 3 until 8. And that's how I made my money all through college and then all through the credential program as well. So I worked a couple of weeknights and then weekends as well. And it pays the bills, you know, I was making a lot more than I would have been like at a minimum wage job or whatever, and I loved it, and it gave me really good experience for teaching later. And then a few nights a week I still had classes as well, which was like an hour in the other direction. So I was living in one city, working an hour away, and then going to school an hour away in a different direction. So it was a little bit crazy. But during your credential program, you'll still have classes that you have to take. And so you'll take like pedagogy classes, where I took a class that was like how to teach social studies. Like, this is the type of stuff that you'll do. And then I also had to take like ELD classes, like how to teach students who are learning English. I think I had to take like a technology course. So some nights I would have a class from 4 to 7 and then a class from 7 to 10, and then drive an hour home and then be back at school in the morning at like 7:30 or whatever, and then go back to work after that. So it's a pretty hectic schedule. A lot of the people in my classes either like lived at home at that time so that they didn't have to work, or they were like servers in a restaurant or something where their hours were a little bit flexible and they could do a lot of weekends and nights and stuff like that. You won't be able to work like a regular 9-to-5 job. And if for some reason your master teachers like can't accommodate you in the morning or whatever, you might have to teach at a different time of day. It just happened to work out for me that I got to do it in the morning and get my periods over with, but it just depends on your situation. Okay, so on top of your student teaching and the classes that you're taking, plus all those prereqs that you did before, you also have to do these things called TPAs, that are teacher performance assessments, and they're horrible. They're just awful. There's no way around it. There are 4 of them, and they're basically just proof that you are learning as you are teaching. So the first one's pretty simple. It's like a lesson planning thing. So how my school did it is we got like a Word file that you could type into. So they would just ask you questions and then you would have to give really detailed answers. It's basically like every little minute decision that you ever have during the day or during a lesson, you have to explain it in like 3 paragraphs. So yeah, I think the first one's like a lesson plan. One of them is where you have to specifically target like 2 students with special needs. Special needs just meaning like you could have a gate kid that's in your class, and so how are you making sure that the work is challenging and interesting for them, and then maybe another student that's a struggling reader or something like that. And so you just have to show and explain how you differentiate your lessons and your teaching for those students. And a lot of these TPAs, once it's all said and done and you've typed everything up, it's like 50 pages. Sometimes you can just submit them online. For my program, I think we had to actually print them out and take them to class, and all the people in the credential program would come together on that day and we would turn in our huge assignments all together. I think the other one is like for English learners, and then your final TPA, TPA 4, is a video of you actually teaching. So you submit I think your entire lesson plan, you have to submit student work, so you have to make sure you save the student work from the lesson that you taught, and you like black out their name and stuff, and you have to submit a video of you actually teaching.
It doesn't seem like a huge deal, you know, you just kind of put things in rows now, but now that it's easier to plant food and easier to grow food and harvest it, how do you think that would change society?
More food. You got more stuff.
More food. Yeah, so if there's more food, then what? Then
fat population.
We get fat. I don't think I got quite fat back then. There wasn't quite that much food. But there's less famine, so less death, right? So there's a larger population, good. So this is going to change the population, it'll change how many kids people can have, you know, how healthy they are, what kind of nutrition they get. So just one invention can change that whole aspect of society. Your next invention, the flying shuttle, and I heard someone say, well, it's flying, it's got to be like a later invention, but it's kind of a misnomer. It's kind of a misleading title.
You submit all of this to the state of California. It's not just your credential program. So somebody in the California Teacher Credential Commission is grading all of these, and I think it's on a scale of 1 to 4, and you have to get at least a 3 in order to pass, otherwise you do it over. So you want to make sure that you do a really good job on these, and sometimes there's a little bit of a benefit later if you get a 4 on all 4 TPAs. Sometimes when you go into BITSA later on, which I think I'll have to make a whole nother video about, sometimes you can get a little bit of time taken off BITSA, so I don't know. You just want to do your best on those and make sure you pass and make sure you get a good grade. So the TPAs are awful. The classes are not so bad because you are, you know, in it with all these other people going through the same thing as you, and you will end up probably making some really good friends because you're all struggling through that first year of teaching together and working and taking classes, and just there's a lot of stress, but you know, you kind of get to let off steam with your friends in class. So once you make it to the end, then you will kind of have a credential. You have to work with your school usually and submit all of your proof that you finished everything. Your master teachers have to like sign off that you actually did a good job. And while you're student teaching, you'll have some kind of an advisor from your school come and observe you and give you like a score to make sure that you know, you're actually growing as a teacher as you student teach. So you have to submit all of that proof, and then you get to pay the CTC to process all of your paperwork. So it's like $75 or something like that. And you have to wait a couple weeks, and then you don't get like an actual diploma or anything like that. It's just when you log on to your account on the CTC website, then it will just show like you have a preliminary credential, but there's no physical anything. You just have a virtual diploma. So keep in mind that this is a preliminary credential. You're still gonna have to clear your credential, which is a whole nother pain in the butt, and I'll make another video about that. So my preliminary credential was in social studies. So I had a single subject credential in social studies. That's a lot of S's. Then because I had so many units in kinesiology, I also had a supplement in PE. So I can teach any history class or PE class. Sometimes with a supplement, it limits you a little bit, but I think with PE, I'm okay. But I haven't actually taught PE since I've become a teacher, so I haven't really had to try that out or anything. So then comes the next step of looking for a job, which was very, very difficult for me. When I got my credential, it was 2011, and that was a horrible time to become a teacher. There were no jobs. Teachers were being laid off left and right. I remember in one school district, people who had been teaching up to 12 years all got laid off. So can you imagine, like, having been a teacher for 12 years and then still getting laid off? So then for us new people trying to get jobs, we were competing against all these people who had a ton of teaching experience, and they were of course getting the jobs over us. Right now it's a little bit better. Actually, it's a lot better. There are a lot more job openings than there were in 2011. And the way that you find a job in California is you go on this website called edjoin.org, and it has listings for most job openings in the state of California. And I think they've even extended to other states. But if you get a teaching credential in California, you probably want to stay in California, because after 5 years, your credential will expire unless you've been teaching in California and you clear your credential. Plus, California does pay more than most other states, so you probably want to stay in California. So another challenge that I had though when I was looking for a job is that there are never very many social studies positions. So if you want to be a history teacher, it can be really hard to get into a district. History teachers, for some reason, just hang on to those jobs like forever. Like they just teach forever and nobody ever retires and they very rarely have opening. So one thing that I started to notice is that there were a lot of like social studies / English positions open, but you had to have either both credentials, or if it was like a 6th grade position, you had to have a multiple subject credential. And I didn't have either of those sets. So I thought it would be smart for me to go back and take the English Cset. So you can add a credential to your credential if you can pass the Cset. No, the English Cset is the longest. It's actually 4 parts. So I think, actually, you know what? I think I did it all in one day. You get 5 hours. So I just had some coffee that morning and I just went to town on it. So I did pass the English Cset. I just happened to be a pretty good writer. I did buy like a Cset prep book. I did this for the social studies one too. On Amazon, they always have like Cset prep books that are very useful. They have like practice tests in them and everything, so you can see what the format's going to be. So I studied really hard for the English one. I think I passed it all in one shot. And then you have to submit that to the CTC as well, and it usually takes quite a while to process, so you can't leave this till the last minute. So now I have a full credential in history, a full credential in English, and then a supplement in PE. So that makes me really marketable. I could apply for any of those jobs, or like what I have now is somebody was looking for someone to teach history and English, and not a lot of people had both credentials, so that was a huge factor in how I got the job that I have now. So taking another Cset is always a way that you can add to your credential. They're really hard though. My husband took the PE Cset. He just got his credential in PE, and that is one of the hardest ones. You would think that maybe it's not that bad, like, oh, how hard can teaching PE be? But nobody ever passes that one. I've never heard of anyone passing it except for my husband. He just happens to be super smart and he studied really, 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 really hard. So it is going to be a lot of work in order to do that. So now he went through a completely different school. It was like a whole online program to get his credential, and his experience was really different. So maybe I could talk him into making a video about his experience. I don't know. But so whatever program you're looking into might be really different from mine. But I just wanted to give you an example of the way that I did it. I'm really happy I did. I'm glad that it's over. The credential program was really hard, actually. It was very rigorous. Actually, while I was in the credential program, I was driving the hour, like from my student teaching gig to class when we were supposed to turn in a TPA. And there was this lady on NPR talking about how unprepared teachers were and how they didn't have any training and they were just getting in there not knowing what they were doing. And I was like, are you serious? So I called in from my car and I told them, like, I am a student teacher right now and I've got a 50-page TPA sitting on the seat next to me right now that I'm about to turn in, and I have to teach for an entire year for free, and I have to take all these classes, plus I have a degree, plus I'm gonna have to do bits of later. Like, I kind of set this lady straight because she was ridiculous. In California, teachers are very well prepared when they go through a credential program. And then actually a lot of my professors, you know, listen to NPR, all of us nerds, so they heard me on the radio, and so then like at the big meeting where we all turned in our TPAs, they like had me get up and speak and talk about what I said on the radio, because I was like, what do you mean we're not prepared? We have lots of preparation. The one thing that I would say they don't really prepare you well for in your teacher credential program is classroom management. There is no class on classroom management and how to deal with behavior. I mean, you take psychology, which I think is like half the battle of classroom management, but I think that is probably the one thing that you really need to research on your own. There are a lot of really good books. I'll make a whole nother video. I need to like start making a list about classroom management strategies and what you can do like over the summer or before you become a teacher, like while you're on the job hunt, to try and kind of get a grasp on what you're going to do for classroom management. But honestly, you could read as much as you want, you can hear as many videos as you want, you just have to do it. You have to get in it, and the only way to learn is by doing, and it's really hard. That's probably one of the hardest things about teaching, and it just comes with experience. So there's certain things that they just can't teach you in a credential program. But anyway, this video is getting really, really long. Thank you if you've stuck with me this far. And if you have any other questions, I will totally answer them. Leave them in the comments below. I like to help other people get their start as a teacher. I love it when new, passionate people want to get into teaching. I think that is amazing. That's great. We need people like you. So leave me any comments you have, leave me any questions. If you've had other experiences, maybe write those down so that other people can kind of see the variety of ways that you can become a teacher. So yeah, it sounds like I've got quite a few more videos to make in this series, but I will try to get those done as I am now on summer vacation and loving it. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video.